I'd like to welcome Tom Levine from the Arabic Tweets team. Hey, Tom.
As Max just discussed, conventional poverty measures are quite time-consuming and expensive to collect, so we wanted to see if we could use social media as a rough proxy for these established indicators. We started with 100 million tweets, and they looked like this. Quite nice. So some of our team spoke Arabic, and they came up with groups with keywords about everyday items. So one line is everyday items, economic status, and emotion. And so we see that these words are mentioned, but there isn't much of a pattern. And even if we had seen a pattern, the meaning would be somewhat unclear and dubious because we haven't related this to any real indicator. So we thought about ways of doing that. One way is if we can find some indicator that should vary periodically over time, we should be able to relate that to the tweets. So this is over day of the week, but you could also do it based on season or holidays. We could also use locations because a lot of poverty data already are related to location. So these are mentions of country hashtags. That's one way of getting location. These are the number of times they were mentioned in the data set. We could also use daily trends. So if we look at when during the day a tweet was posted for a particular user, we can figure out which time zone the user's in. So I talked about some pretty obvious variables, but there are some things that you might not realize you could extract from tweets. Just as an example, there's research on extracting the gender of speakers. So we could figure out the gender of people tweeting, and that could be useful in some model. There's also some research relating social connectedness to socioeconomic status. So people who are more connected should be wealthier. We looked at the mentions in the tweets and created this visual where the big dots that are not very visible are people who are very connected. So it would be interesting to see if these people are wealthier. So generally, no real robust conclusions, but there's definitely potential in using Twitter data and other social media data for measuring poverty. And can the team stand up?
Oh yeah, the poverty Arabic Tweets team. Give it up. Santiago from the poverty team was working with you guys earlier. I don't know if he's here or where he is, but he was also awesome. So before we take questions, I just want to point out that this team was given 100 million Arabic tweets to analyze without even a specific question. There wasn't even an expert to say we'd like to know this or that. And from that, we're able to discern that you may be able to, just listening to the language that not everyone spoke, the gender, the connectedness, what country someone might be from. So I think those are just incredible potential ideas that you could glean from looking at social media to understand socioeconomic work. So another round of applause for that. Do you have any questions from the audience? Yes, from Neil.
Could you say a bit more about the map? What does that show?
You mean this?
Yeah.
All this shows is to remind you that there are centers of connection. We didn't really look at this, except they exist. This is something you could consider, and it looks pretty. Actually, the bigger reason is we had it all loaded in the database, and we wanted to use that, and we were playing with the sample all day, so Max overnight, even though he wasn't on the team, just like, with this up, yeah.
And so quickly, how would you describe like a point on this graph?
So specifically, you have every user who tweeted, and then all the mentions all the people they mentioned. And so basically, it's a series of connections between those individuals, and they're tighter together for the people who communicate more regularly with each other.
Right. And the colors?
The colors are clusters, so groups that seem to talk with each other more. So the top 3 clusters, each one had about 10% of the total nodes, so some of those had sort of groups, but it was pretty dispersed network.
Awesome.
But anyways, this was
so
more to do, but I guess between 2 and 3 in the morning is what we were able to do.
Right. These are those people doing this at 2 and 3 in the morning, number one. It's amazing. But for those who couldn't quite hear that, that's everyone who was talking in this data set and connected by who they were talking to and who they were mentioning, the colors relating sort of people who are close to each other, very tightly connected. Very cool. Yeah, one more?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree you created a pretty awesome piece of art as well. Really, and as you were doing this, were there any other data sets that your team wished you had in addition to, like, you came across saying, wish we had this, we could add this to that?
Detailed location. Detailed location.
Detailed location of the tweets, right?
So you weren't able to get that from the
Yeah. So Twitter doesn't, I think it does. So I've done this before. You have to, it's like the documentation for the Twitter API is sort of wrong in this aspect, I think, when I did it before. So you can get the locations, but it's harder. There are other ways we could have gotten location, and that's one thing we would have liked to have location. But also, oh shoot, I'm not going to remember properly right now, but yeah.
We have lots in the hack pad.
Yeah.
So we could go with that. Yes, Persona.
Okay.
Good to know.
So came from Qatar Institute and stripped out the location.
Great. So that's something we could have. Amazing work. So even without that, great stuff. Thank you guys. Awesome.